Hello to everyone out there watching, members of the site, readers, lurkers, anybody who comes across this. This is Cats Illustrated TV, CITV. It's been a while since we've had an episode. I'm publisher Justin Rowland, joined by our managing editor and photographer, kind of a Renaissance man, Jeff Drummond, and we got Travis Graf as well. And the timing of this is right at the start of fall camp. Kentucky, this is the third day that I think the team has been at it. And Jeff, in just a little bit, so you know when this is going up, Jeff is going to be reporting on what the defensive staff has to say today. So we've got real sports to talk about. Jeff, how are you doing, man?
Yeah, doing great. It feels good to be back kind of in the saddle again, so to speak, and to have actual things to talk about except our favorite games from 100 years ago.
I know. Travis, did you feel like we were going to get to this point, or you just, are you still uncertain as to how things are going to go from here? Or do you feel pretty good about a season?
I feel pretty good now, but up until this point, it's been a journey of peaks and valleys for me. I would get really excited. Oh, yeah, we're going to have a season. And then I would get, oh, man, there's no way we have a season. But now it looks, writing's on the wall. It seems like they're going forward with thoughts of having a season. So it's like Jeff said, it's nice to have something of substance to talk about.
Well, the topic of today's episode of CITV is our predictions for Kentucky's football season. And, I posted mine on the site. I think the guys here are going to do that as well. So I'll begin, and then we'll go through game by game. I picked Kentucky to finish 6-4, which, once I put that on the site, I don't think too many people had a huge problem with it. I think a lot of people understood, that seems like a reasonable prediction. I think some people wanted to say 7-3. And I shot back on the site, and, Travis, we'll get into this here. I thought 5-5 is more likely than 7-3 personally. But I went with 6-4 because I feel like it's a mature team. It's an experienced team, but there's still probably a little bit of talent deficit compared to 2 or 3, maybe 3 or 4 teams on the schedule. I could see them winning a game or two that maybe they're not supposed to win or expected to win. But the odds say in an all-conference schedule, you're not going to blow through, every team that you're supposed to be a close favorite against. So I went 6-4, and just consider their 10-3 team a couple of years ago was 5-3 in the SEC, which is pretty similar to 6-4. So when I say 6-4, it's not meant to be a slight. It's meant to say this is one of 2 Kentucky teams in the last 43 years now, I guess, that would have had a winning record in the SEC. So against a very difficult schedule, I think 6 wins would be a major accomplishment. Jeff, I know you've angsted over this. What's your pick for Kentucky?
I've scribbled out my pick so many times today. It's not funny. So usually I say, stick with your gut. That's usually where it's right. I'm trying to be too perfect after flirting with the perfecto last season and Tennessee spoiling my perfect season prediction. I still have nightmares of that goal line stand. But I'm sitting at 6-4. Like you, I've been kind of preaching to those who may get upset with that or suggest it's a step backwards, that the circumstances are different. When you got a 10-game conference schedule, you're talking about a Kentucky program that's had a, broken 500 in the SEC only 2 times in my lifetime. I want to say it's either 2 or 3. So you got to keep that in mind. This is a tough way to go about business playing in this league, and every one of these games could be interesting to some extent. So I'm going to go with 6-4, but I would suggest they could go 5-5 and play a lot better than they did last season.
Yeah, I'm with you. I said a long time ago, and I took some heat from it on I think Louisville radio stations, that 5-5 there would be no shame in it this year. There's going to be some good. I think 5-5 could be a top 25 caliber team. Last year's team, by the end of the season, was a really solid team, and they were 3-5 in the SEC. So, Travis, you're more bullish on the Cats this year than us. Why don't you tell us what your prediction is?
Yeah, like I've talked to you all behind the scenes about it before we got on here. I think that Kentucky is a top 5. I think they have the best offensive line in the SEC. I think they've got a top 5 defense. I think they're really good in both sides of the trenches. And I think that as long as they have a solid run game, they should be able to do pretty well this year. But I could see anywhere from 5-5 or 5-5 to 7-3. I lean 7-3, but I think it's closer to 6-4 than it is to 8-2. I think that the way that Mark Stoops talks about this team, the way that the media talks about this team, you look at the 3 deep, there's more talent across the board for this team than there ever has been in my lifetime out of quality players and quality blue chip recruits, 3, 4, 5-star recruits throughout the board. I think that 5-5 would kind of be a disappointment for me personally for the way that this team is talked about and the expectations leading up to this year before it went to all SEC schedule.
Well, if they finish 7-3, which I think is possible if everything goes their way. If they finish 7-3, with you take out the teams in the Big Ten and the Pac-12 that might be competing this winter, but not this fall, that's probably a top 15 or a top 10 team, I would say. I mean, because you're talking about some really big wins in there and probably not really any bad losses. I think the team that finished 10-3 finished what were they, 12th or 13th nationally? I don't remember exactly, but we're going to go through the schedule here game by game. And Kentucky starts as I want to say a 7.5-point underdog against Auburn on the road. Very interesting dynamic with, I think it's only going to be students in a much reduced capacity in Jordan-Hare Stadium. And the last time Kentucky played at Auburn, I was there, and it was very cold, and Randall Cobb orchestrated a late game comeback that shocked the Auburn fans there. They were dejected. I mean, they were some dejected people. I want to say it was the first time in maybe 70-something years or so, or something like that, that Kentucky had won a football game in the state of Alabama. And are they going to do it again? I've said I think it's a great matchup for Kentucky. I think it's similar to the matchup with Florida the last couple of years in that I like Auburn's talent in the trenches, but I think Kentucky has an advantage at the line of scrimmage. I think it's a mature and experienced team that plays with a chip. They're going to go on the road looking to prove something. Auburn doesn't have the typical home field advantage. And Bo Nix is kind of one of those pocket passers who sometimes tries to fit it in and makes a bad decision. And I just like the matchup for Kentucky. So I don't remember the score, but I picked Kentucky to win a close one, maybe 21-20. Are you guys with me on that, or do you think Auburn gets them? We'll start with you, Jeff.
Well, this is one of 3 games that I considered kind of swing games when I looked over the schedule, and one of 2 that were really, really tough for me to break down. And there's a lot of factors at play right now. For one, Kentucky talent-wise, I think may have the better roster than Auburn going into this game. And it especially shows up on the offensive and defensive lines. That's where Kentucky should have an advantage. And my gut tells me that's where games are won and lost in the SEC, on an annual basis. But then I've got some little things nagging me, like Kentucky out of the gates hasn't been very good in the Stoops era. The first game, for whatever reason, has been a real struggle for the Cats, and usually not against an opponent with this kind of talent. I think only one time in the previous 7 openers for Stoops have they really played really good football. So it's a team that usually gets better as the season moves along, and that first game they got to iron out a lot of wrinkles. So that gives me a lot of concern for this one. I ended up putting them down for a loss in this one. And it was really hard for me to do because I think they should win this game. But that just something makes me think with Terry Wilson coming back and having been out for a while and all the other factors that this one might be a very narrow victory for Auburn.
It could certainly happen. I mean, I think some Kentucky fans are going to be surprised that Auburn is a 7.5-point favorite in this game. But Bo Nix has some weapons. I mean, he's got some speed. Seth Williams, Anthony Schwartz. You're going to have Sean Shivers at running back, and they're never lacking for talent, and Auburn's always got speed on defense. So, Travis, if you've got Kentucky, if you're leaning 7-3, am I wrong in assuming you've got Kentucky winning this opener as well, or do you think Auburn's going to do it?
Yeah, I think Kentucky wins this one narrowly. I think I had the score written down as 28-24. I think, like Jeff, I'm going to echo what Jeff said. I think Kentucky's better in the trenches. Bo Nix is a stud. He's got Seth Williams and Anthony Schwartz, but they're also replacing Boobie Whitlow from the backfield, who unexpectedly left the program over the offseason. I think that – and then they're replacing 2 absolute studs on the defensive line. And I think that just all that coupled with some moving parts on their end, and then linebackers probably the best part of their defense when looking at it on paper. But I think I like the way Kentucky matches up in every position for real outside of wide receiver and quarterback. So let's see where the chips fall in this game. But I'll say this, Gus Malzahn, his week 1 games are pretty impressive since he's been at Auburn. He has a pretty good showing during week 1. So it could be, like Jeff said, Mark Stoops' first week struggles coupled with Malzahn's first week heroics could be a disaster for the Cats as well. So
yeah, I don't think either one of these coaches, either one of these programs, are having any problem with a lower scoring game. I would be surprised if this one is a higher scoring game. They're typically your teams that will run it and play it somewhat close to the vest, especially when they have a lead. So, expect a lot of running in this game, even with Nick's having all those weapons. But let's tackle both Mississippi schools here for the sake of keeping it somewhat brief. So Travis and I have them at 1-0, Jeff at 0-1. I've got them beating Ole Miss. The reason being, I think Ole Miss's run defense is going to be an issue. And I think Kentucky coming back to Lexington, I think they're going to be riding high. I think that offensive line is going to just pound and pound and pound away at them. But I do think it's going to be close. I think, with a mobile quarterback and Lane Kiffin, that's a dangerous team. I think Ole Miss is a team that's going to be more dangerous this year than maybe some people are giving them credit for. I wouldn't be shocked if Kentucky comes home and it's almost like a pick 'em, according to Vegas. And so I think it's going to be close. But then I've got them losing to Mississippi State. I think the adrenaline will maybe wear off a little bit. A lot of people are going to – Mississippi State does have questions. They've got questions at receiver. They've got questions at defense. They got a first-year coach. And this is not the year to have a first-year coach, but – you got Mike Leach, you got KJ Costello, you got that running back. I mean, they're gonna put a scare into some teams with that offense. And I just think the odds of them being 3-0 after Auburn, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State, as good as Kentucky can be, chances are they're gonna stub their toe in one of those games. They're gonna lose one of those games. And so I'll say 2-1 with a loss to Mississippi State. Jeff, what are you thinking?
Well, I've got them winning both of these games. I think it's good that they catch Ole Miss early with a new coach. And the same could apply to Mississippi State, too, catching Leach before he really has a chance to get that snowball rolling. I like the matchup in the second one. Kentucky, Mississippi State. Kentucky's got a great defensive backfield, in my opinion, for this season. I know they're going to be jacked up to play against somebody that's going to throw it around like Mississippi State does. And I think that'll be the difference. That combined with Kentucky's O-line and running game, I think they're going to lean on the Bulldogs and kind of keep that offense off the field, build a lead, get out ahead of those guys and force them to throw even more than they typically would. And that can lead to mistakes. So I see 2 wins for Kentucky in those games.
Travis, what are you thinking about the Mississippi schools in Kentucky?
The Ole Miss game, Plumlee, like you said, he's a great dual threat quarterback. UK struggles historically against dual threat guys, but he's not that great of a passer. And they're in a rebuilding year. Their defense and them in the trenches isn't up to snuff where Kentucky's at right now. But I think Kentucky wins that game by about 14 points. I forget what I had it as on paper, but I think Kentucky wins a narrow 3 to 7 point win against Mississippi State. I think Costello's a stud. I want to see how he fits in the air raid system. I want to see how Colin Hill does an air raid system as well. And then now Dan Mullen's defensive studs aren't there as well. So we're going to see how they replace those guys on the defensive end.
We'll continue talking about these games in twos. I think to recap, Jeff and I have them at 2-1, and Travis, correct, you've got them at 3-0. Yeah. That brings us to at Tennessee and then Georgia at home. And when I wrote up my picks, initially I had them losing to Tennessee, and I said I can't pick Kentucky to beat Tennessee in Knoxville until they do it. And then I thought it over, and I said, what the heck? It's 2020. It's a strange year. This game is happening a lot earlier in the season than it typically does, which is an interesting dynamic. The stadium capacity is going to be an interesting dynamic. Last year, Tennessee didn't start all that great under Jeremy Pruitt. They got hotter as the season went along. We'll see if that's a trend under him. But I think guys like Drake Jackson and Landon Young, I think it's almost going to be I look at that as like a culmination game for them as they go out, or maybe not as they go out because the NCAA's ruling coming Friday. I think Kentucky's going to win in Knoxville and snap another long streak, and it'll be a great feather in their cap. So I've got Tennessee losing to Kentucky and the Cats at 3-1, and then I picked Georgia to beat them 21-7. Just because, and I'll always say this, they don't seem to be a great matchup for Kentucky. Kentucky can push most teams around. They're not going to push Georgia around. You try to beat Georgia at their own game, you better be Alabama. And I just think Kentucky's going to have a very hard time moving the ball against Georgia. We saw that last season, granted with Bowden at quarterback, but that's a stout defense, maybe the best defense in the country that Kirby Smart's going to have. I do think Kentucky's defense can give them some problems, but as we saw last year, that I think they will succumb to Georgia's superior depth and talent. Jeff, you got them at 2-1. What about Tennessee and Georgia games?
Well, I'm sticking with your old advice on that Tennessee game until they do it, because I've left that game probably 4 of the last 5 years saying, what the heck happened? You know, I'm standing here on the field. I see which team is better on the field, and Tennessee keeps winning. So until Kentucky can stop that and get over whatever that hump is that they have with them, it's hard for me to pick that one. The Georgia game, I think it's interesting, especially being in Lexington. That's one, if we were in normal circumstances and we had fans in the stands, like a full stadium, that place would be rocking for that game. And I think it would give Kentucky a little boost. And traditionally, Kentucky plays Georgia decent up here. But I agree with Justin, and there's just probably too much talent disparity right now. Even though the gap has narrowed, Georgia's still Georgia, and they're really good. So I've got them dropping those two, and that'll put them at 2-3 at that point.
Yeah. How many games have we been through? 2-3. So by that time, everybody's calling for Mark Stoops' head again. They've forgotten everything he's done for the program, and we're all having trouble managing the message board. Travis, you've got him at 3-0. What happens against the Vols and the Bulldogs?
This is the part of the schedule where I have Kentucky going into a slump. Like you all both alluded to, I'm not going to pick Kentucky to beat Tennessee until they do so consistently, because Kentucky has had the better team for the last 3 or 4, maybe 5 years, and has somehow choked it away or just laid a dud in every single game. And then, so I have them losing that game probably by about a touchdown. And then Georgia game, it's going to be a much better showing than it was at Kroger Field 2 years ago. Kentucky just didn't have the Jimmies and the Joes and the 3 deep to compete for 4 quarters against Georgia in that game. I think that Kentucky loses this game probably 27-14. I love Georgia's defense, and I think that it's going to be hard for Kentucky to put up a lot of points against them.
We'll cover the next 2 games quickly. I've got them beating Missouri and Vanderbilt. I think it's a really nice stretch in the middle of the season. Over 3 weeks, you get a bye, and you get probably 2 of the 3 weakest teams that you're going to face. And they better not lose one of those games, but I've got them running over pretty much. I think they're just physically better than Missouri and Vanderbilt. And so with 2 losses through 7 games, I've got Kentucky at 5-2. And against that schedule, I wouldn't be surprised if Kentucky is, I don't know how polls are going to work this year, but maybe a top 15 team pressing in on the top 10. Who knows at that point? But Jeff, Travis, do you just briefly agree on Kentucky beating those 2 teams?
Well, those are 2. If you want to have a good season, you got to take care of business in both of those games. Anything can happen when you're playing SEC, but you've got to have W's in those. And I've got them down for wins in both to push them to 4-3 at that point.
Travis?
Yeah, if Kentucky truly turned the corner, you win these games pretty easily, in my opinion. I think that Missouri's rebuilding on offense. They've lost 3 of their top wide receivers. They have 4 options at quarterback. They haven't really set in on one last time I checked. Larry Roundtree's a nice option, and then Vanderbilt, I think Derek Mason's I think he's done after this year. I don't think they win a game in the SEC.
Yeah, the only thing that's interesting about coaches on the hot seat is, do they get a mulligan with budgets constricting so much at schools this year? Buyouts are going to be difficult for some schools to come by. Let's just hit the last 3 games here. Keep this a short, pleasant viewing experience for everybody. Alabama, Florida, South Carolina. I've got them losing 35-10 to Alabama. I think they can keep it close for a while, but the same with Georgia. I just think my question about Kentucky, the reason I can't put Kentucky at 7-3 is I love the offensive line. I love the defense. I think the offense is still a bit of a question mark, and I don't think it's going to be a horrible offense, but I don't know if the offense is going to be good enough to really test the defenses at Georgia and Alabama and places like that. We're just going to have to see, you know. I got them losing at Alabama. I think the fact that they have to go to Alabama and Florida back-to-back, the second game of back-to-back games on the road, a lot of people will tell you that's hard in college football because of the quick turnaround, the travel, your schedule's adjusted so much. I like the way they match up with Florida. I actually think Florida is going to be hyped at this point in the season because their schedule sets up really well. Florida's going to be playing for a lot late in the year, and it's going to be a very important game for them. So I've got the Gators beating Kentucky 24-14. That brings Kentucky to 5-4, and then rounding out the season 6-4 with a win over South Carolina. They just lost a freshman running back who was a human highlight reel in high school today. And I don't know how much they're going to be playing for late in the year, but I got Kentucky at 6-4, losses to Alabama, Florida, and beating South Carolina. Jeff, how do you have them finishing the season?
Well, I've got them falling at Alabama, but I think that's going to be a real entertaining game. I can't wait to see it. The last time Kentucky went down there in 2016, a lot of people forget, it was a 10-3 game with about 5 minutes left in the second quarter. And Alabama scores late in the second quarter, scores early in the third quarter, and then it kind of slips away from there. But Kentucky, much better than they were in 2016 from a talent standpoint. Alabama, maybe not the same level of strength, even though, you know, they're going to be a top 5 team this season by all estimation. So I think that's going to be an entertaining game, a competitive game. Bama probably pulls it out, much like Georgia on overall talent. Florida, that's the one I'm going with a W. And I think it's a good matchup, like you said, Justin, in a lot of ways. I went back and forth on the Auburn game and the Florida game. I think Kentucky's going to win one of those. I picked Auburn to take the first one, so I'm going to stick with Kentucky. Same deal with Tennessee. Kind of Kentucky on the field, when you watch this game up close, has been the better team in recent years. They've been better coached and they've played better. They've found ways to mess it up towards the end. But I think they're going to get the job done in this one and then take care of business at home against South Carolina in the finale and put me down for 6-4.
Your 6-4 by the end of the season would have people a little bit more excited than my 6-4 because you've got them going from 2-3 to 6-4 and finishing with Florida and South Carolina wins. People would be very hyped about that. Travis, I don't remember exactly what you have them at this point in the season, but you're going to get 7-3. How did the last 3 games play out for you?
Yeah, so my third and final loss will come at Alabama. I just don't think Alabama's just going to be a monster this year. I feel like I would much rather play Mac Jones as Alabama's quarterback than Tua. But Mac Jones has arguably the best offensive line in the SEC and the best weapons in the SEC as well. I think Kentucky loses that game. I think it's a respectable loss. I think it's something like 35-17. I don't think it's a blowout, but I think the key for that game is Kentucky needs to play their game and try to manage the clock. If they try to go score for score with Alabama, that's going to turn out to be an ugly result for them in the end. Florida, like Jeff said, since 2014, there's only been one bad showing against Florida, which was 2016, the blowout where Drew Barker had his back all messed up. Kentucky has shot themselves in the foot 2 to 3 other times, has been right there in overtime in the swamp in 2014. 2015 had a drop touchdown pass. 2017, the 2 wide open receivers. 2019, the big comeback in the second half. But, yeah, I think UK wins that game by about a touchdown. I'd say 28-21. South Carolina, I think that Muschamp is another coach that's on the hot seat. They just lost Marshawn Lloyd, like you all talked about. I'm not really big on Ryan Helinski. I think he's a little bit overhyped, and I think on paper Kentucky has more talent than South Carolina. And outside last year, Kentucky's had South Carolina's number, so I look for that to continue and bring Kentucky to 7-3 to end the season.
Well, some common themes, 6-4, 7-3, all pretty similar predictions. It sounds like that would have Kentucky as probably one of the 5-6 best teams in the SEC. I think they would certainly be ranked in the top 25 with even a 6-4 record with as many teams as aren't going to be playing this fall. And the last thing I'll ask before we go, is there a record that you could look at and say that's not acceptable? Because I would have to go all the way down to 4-6 for me to say it's really a disappointing season. Because we've pointed to this year for so long. This is going to be a great year, great team. You have to adjust the expectations because of the All-SEC schedule. But I think 5-5 would still be acceptable. Travis, you said you'd be a little bit disappointed by that.
I'd be a little bit disappointed in 5-5, but I can understand it. I think 4-6 would be the marker, like you said, that is the point for like, all right, what are we doing here? Like barring something unforeseen, like a horrific injury to a key player on either side of the ball. But I think that playing the All-SEC schedule, it sets up a little bit different. Like you said, the talent is there. If it was a normal year, I think Kentucky's a top 25 team because you get the MAC wins and then the Louisville win. And I think that just going off the SEC record alone, there's going to be a lot of like 5-5 could get you right in the middle of the pack in the SEC combined East and West. So I think that would still be a decent showing. You know, it'd be a little disappointing considering where everybody considers the program to be, but I think it'd be fine.
Not a lot of teams in the country would go 6-4 in the SEC this year against this schedule. Jeff, you alluded to this. I think is under 500 kind of the cutoff for what you think should be viewed as an okay season at least?
Yeah, I think so. I think if they were 5-5, I know there'd be disappointment within the building over there because they think they're a lot better than that and they think they've taken the next step and need to take care of business. But this is a weird year. I think people are going to have to consider all the circumstances with the pandemic and everything that goes into it. And there might be some more hurdles that we run into as this thing goes along. We just don't know. But I think you would definitely have a case for disappointment if you had a losing record.
Well, it sounds cliche. It sounds a little bit corny, but this has been a crazy year and there's a lot of suffering out there. And so it's true. If we get 10 games in, everybody's a winner. You know, we don't know if it's going to happen. If we just get to the end of the season and everybody's relatively healthy and we can avoid the worst case scenarios, then I think we all have to count that as a great win. So Jeff, Travis, really appreciate you guys joining me. Thanks for watching CITV. We got a free 60-day trial going on. Go to the front page of catsillustrated.com. We'd love for you to join our community. Thank you for sticking with us through hard times and really, really excited to finally have some real sports to talk about and preview. Thanks again, guys.
All right.